You know, in the 10 years that Minecraft has been around, there have been many updates. Some were very small and almost unnoticeable to players, while others were so significant that they changed the course of the game. These updates didn't just add new features, they altered existing ones that could have stayed as they were. There is one very old update that most fans remain skeptical about to this day. It was an update that turned the game upside down and made people, so to speak, get used to Minecraft all over again. And today, I want to tell you about it. This update was released on September 14th, 2011, and was called Beta 1.8. Originally, before Notch started actively using Twitter, he maintained a blog on Tumblr. Many of you watching this video might not even know what I'm talking about, but back then, it was quite trendy and cool. But that's not the point. On June 10th, 2011, Notch casually announced this update on his Tumblr and planned to implement all the new features in version Beta 1.7 from August 26th to 28th. At the PX Computer Festival, anyone could visit the Mojang booth and play the early version of the adventure update. But things were not so simple. Beta 1.7 was released, but the promised content wasn't included. The main changes in this version were the addition of pistons, both regular and sticky, a texture change for cobblestone, and the introduction of shears. Yes, these are important things, but where was the grand scale? Where was everything the developers, and Notch in particular, had promised? Something unexpected happened. The adventure update was too enormous, so much so that they had to split it into two parts, which were released at different times. Because the update was so huge, many people started complaining that they would now have to learn everything all over again. Oh, if only those were our problems, since now we complain that updates aren't big enough and we want more. Apparently, the developers realized something very important after this update and stopped making them too large. Let's start by talking about the mobs. The most significant mob from this update, in my opinion, is the Enderman. That's right, the Enderman first appeared in this version of Minecraft with green eyes. This is why the Ender Pearl has a green color. The Enderman even had green eyes in the trailer. Unfortunately, in Minecraft version 1.8.1, the Enderman's eyes turned purple to match the particles of the end portal. It's unclear why they did this. Maybe it was necessary. Also, it's important to note that until the official release of version 1.0, the Enderman used the zombie sound. Could be hit by arrows, and even skeletons could hit them. If you looked at them in any way, they would still react to you and chase you for a long time, even walking into water and dying. This version also introduced the much-hated silverfish and cave spiders. Moving on to cosmetic changes in Minecraft, in this version, the main menu was updated. Previously, it was completely static, with a background made of dirt blocks, the version number in the upper right corner, and the only animated part being the splash on the Minecraft logo. In this version, we were greeted with a fully animated menu, a blurred background showing a Minecraft landscape, and the version number moved to the bottom right corner. New options were added in the settings. You could now adjust brightness, which was a big plus, and also change the field of view. The textures of cobblestone and mossy cobblestone were also changed. They became softer compared to the more saturated textures of previous versions. The critical hit also appeared in this version, and if you landed one, star-shaped particles would appear around the mob. TNT also changed. Before, the particles from an explosion looked different, but in this version, they became what we remember today and haven't changed since. Boats and minecarts received minor changes too. Previously, you could break them by holding down the left mouse button, but in this version, you had to break them with single clicks, and this remains the case today. The lighting was finally improved, with a smooth transition between day and night, clouds and fog changing color during sunrise and sunset, and block lighting now depending on the type of light source. Although this has changed over time, it was in this version that we first saw smooth transitions. Now let's move on to the most exciting part: natural structures. Who would have thought that this version was the first to introduce NPC villages? Back then, they were called that. But the villages were completely empty. There were no villagers, not even a chest with loot in the blacksmith's shop. Initially, Notch himself worked on the villages, but later handed the project over to Jeb, who finished it. He also planned for new mobs, pigmen, to live in these villages, but as you can see, that didn't happen. Strongholds were also introduced, though they couldn't be found because Ender Pearls didn't have a function yet, and only dropped from Endermen without any use. Players found them purely by accident, and as you might guess, there was no portal in them. Only one stronghold existed per world, but later, this number was increased to 3. This version also introduced abandoned mineshafts. So much of what we know today first appeared in this version. Mineshafts weren't as well designed back then, often generating with many errors, and many rails would be floating in the air. Canyons were also added, and honestly, they haven't changed much since. They are the same as they were back then. And now we come to the really significant changes, the ones that made many players dislike this update so much. Let's start with the new biome generation system. As you've gathered, the new structures were also part of the biomes, but we'll get back to that later. Biomes became much larger. Rivers were introduced, flowing between biomes. Oceans became much deeper and significantly larger in area. A mountainous biome was added, as well as a swamp biome. Now, the ocean floor consisted of sand, dirt, and clay. But the problem was that if a player loaded a world created before the update and explored new chunks, the world would be broken, causing inconsistencies in the terrain generation between old and new chunks. Importantly, seeds from previous versions stopped working in the new ones. A new combat mechanic was introduced. The bow no longer just shot arrows, you now had to draw the bowstring to shoot farther or shorter. As I mentioned earlier, critical hits were introduced, dealing slightly more damage. And the famous block attack feature appeared, the one where you could block an attack with a sword by right-clicking, which only changed in the official version 1.9. Hostile mobs also received their attack animations, like zombies raising their arms or skeletons drawing their bowstrings when aiming at the player. Experience points also made their debut in this version of Minecraft. So many features that were added in this version have remained unchanged for a very long time. Experience orbs could only be obtained by killing mobs. The hunger system, this drove people crazy. Previously, there was no hunger bar at all. Food only served to restore health, so if you had full health, there was no need to eat. In the new versions, food no longer restored health. But if your hunger bar was filled by more than 80%, health would automatically regenerate by half a heart every 5 seconds. Eating food was accompanied by an animation and took 1.5 seconds. New food items were added. Melon slices, raw and cooked beef, chicken, and rotten flesh. Eating raw chicken or rotten flesh could cause poisoning. Pumpkin seeds and melon seeds were also added. And yes, this version introduced sprinting. Finally, you could quickly cover distances or run away from mobs. Animal behavior also underwent significant changes. Friendly mobs would start running chaotically when taking damage. This too led many players to criticize the update. Zombies finally started dropping rotten flesh instead of random feathers, and players dealt half a heart less damage to mobs. And in my opinion, the most important addition was the full creative mode. It couldn't be enabled with commands in single-player mode. You could only choose it when creating a world. There was no health bar, hunger bar, or experience bar. Blocks were infinite. Though the creative menu was quite basic, it wasn't organized at all, just one page with blocks, and flight was available, activated by double-tapping the spacebar. This update ended, but don't forget the most important thing. All these innovations were pivotal in Minecraft's development. Some of what was added in this update hasn't changed for 14 years.